Good afternoon. I'm going to go ahead and kick off the last session of the day. Hopefully we can all stay awake, including me. I'd like to thank General McKenzie, Jim Cordoso, and Glenn Beckman for the very kind invitation to come speak today. I'm going to do a little bit of housekeeping first. If you need to get up and go outside, take a phone call, grab a cup of coffee, bio break, what have you, please feel free. It's not a movie theater. It's not going to faze me in the least. This session is not being live streamed, but it will be published as a paper, white paper, or a monograph at some point a couple of weeks or a month or so from now. Everything I'm going to be talking about is fully sourced in that paper. In the interest of keeping the session a little bit interactive, I have placed a few QR codes on some of the key slides so that you can look up some of the references right now if you so choose. That's completely up to you. Just thought it might be a fun way to make this a little more interactive given the topic area. My name is Tom Waters. I'm the Assistant Director for Startups here at USF in the Technology Transfer Office. I've been here for about 18 months now, but I've been a longtime member in the Tampa Bay area for the last 20 years. I'm talking today about social media, artificial intelligence, and national security, which means there's something here to offend just about everyone. The subject, I think you're all aware, is a popular social media startup called TikTok. If you have teenagers, you already know what TikTok is. If you've watched television, listened to a podcast, or read anything concerning privacy, data collection, or foreign influence campaigns, you probably know just enough about TikTok to be dangerous. I'm going to try and explain what all of the uproar is really all about. Just to set the stage a little bit, the U.S. Army has banned TikTok on all of its devices. Several states have forbidden it on government-provided IT systems. A handful of attorneys general are trying to out and out ban it within their specific states. Amazon has forbidden their employees from using it on any device that also accesses the company email system. And the reason for all of this hand-wringing can be summed up in one word: China. The Justice Department reports that 90% of all economic espionage committed against the United States over the past 10 years has been committed by China. 90%. The FBI's website states that confronting this threat is their primary counterintelligence priority. Now, to be clear, I'm talking about the Chinese Communist Party here, the CCP. I am not referring to the Chinese people, who have most definitely been victims of the CCP far longer than any of us. Certainly some of our allies, Taiwan, Japan, and South Korea, off the top of my head, have had to deal with the Chinese communist threat far longer than we have, and more directly than we have thus far. With that being said, Beijing has been ramping up its military capabilities, completing sea trials of its first homegrown aircraft carrier, and conducting drills against mock-ups of a Nimitz-class aircraft carrier and Arleigh Burke-class destroyers in the Taklamakan Desert, which is a missile test range that they've had for a number of years. It's even got a privately operated Top Gun-style Navy flight school in Africa. Speaking of Top Gun, China has been doing a lot in the entertainment business to shore up their image somewhat. Tom Cruise's pilot jacket in Top Gun Maverick featured patches with the flags of Japan and Taiwan. And initially bending to Chinese perceptions, Hollywood removed the flags in the film's first trailer. You may remember it was delayed during COVID. The film was eventually released with all of the original flags in their original form. China has financed other film projects that put it in a very positive light, as it did for the 2019 World War II epic Midway, starring Woody Harrelson, Ed Skrein, and Tampa Bay's own hometown son, Patrick Wilson, in the lower left-hand corner there. Now, TikTok is owned by a Beijing-based company called ByteDance. Launched in September of 2016, it has surpassed every other social media platform in annual revenue growth, achieving $12 billion a year, faster than YouTube, Facebook, or Twitter. Initially, it was popular only with teenagers posting 15-second videos of dance moves and silly skits. TikTok invested heavily into more grown-up content, including financial services, video games, and music streaming. The AARP just recently released a manual for their members on how to use TikTok, so it is beginning to skew a little bit older. What we're talking about here is social media. something I think we're all very tired of talking about. Facebook and data privacy, is Elon Musk going to buy Twitter or not? Snapchat predators chasing young girls, we're all a little fed up with all of the drama. Though we don't want Google tracking us, we do want Google Maps to tell us about a traffic accident 4 miles down the road that we can't even see yet. Google can only do that because it's tracking everybody who has the app on their phone. You cannot have one without the other. And I think empirically we all know that. It is the price we pay for using that platform. But there are national security risks to some of these social media platforms that seem otherwise rather innocuous. For example, Iran's IRGC used LinkedIn a few years ago to go after Defense Department and defense aerospace executives by making friends through their families. They only got caught because one of their profiles unwittingly used a photograph of New York Times best-selling author Alexander McCall Smith, who was the author of the #1 Ladies Detective Agency series. And from there, the whole house of cards just sort of fell apart. A young analyst here in Tampa created the middle graphic there. He used data from Twitter to analyze the Arab Spring. He was able to identify the 10 people most responsible for the fall of Hosni Mubarak by analyzing how the protesters found each other on the streets of Cairo. He did that all through open source information freely available from Twitter, nothing classified, and despite not speaking a lick of Arabic himself. And finally, on the right, 5 years ago, in a rather telling incident, Russian agents were poaching user data from smartphones in the Ukraine from soldiers, including Americans. Social media apps provided the names of the soldiers' families, and the GPS chip on the phone provided the soldiers' exact location. Some of these agents were walking up to servicemen out on the economy and commenting about family members by name. A very effective bit of harassment, to say the least. Now, I'm not suggesting that the United States and the government has not used similar software programs, far from it. I was a part of a team at U.S. Special Operations Command that used predictive analytics to support special forces teams throughout the world. Using what was then state-of-the-art analytics, we were able to tell commando teams precisely where to find and when to capture terrorist groups in very dangerous areas. We did so with a correlational statistics software package called Signature Analyst. It blended satellite imagery, communications intercepts, and sociocultural data layers to mathematically map and predict where bad guys were going to show up. Special forces teams could then shoot, loot, or recruit these people, depending on the operation, and we were extremely successful, receiving several commander's coins and a White House commendation. The system worked, in part, because statistical software systems like this have a unique benefit. They can identify their weak data points. They can show an analyst where information is odd or missing or simply incomplete. The analyst can then fill in that missing data and improve the model. In doing so, software like this is able to predict with very high accuracy how successful it will be at identifying whatever it is you're trying to find. In this instance, we were hunting bad guys, and we bagged a good number of them. But it was very labor intensive. We had 20 analysts and could only work on one target at any given time. We had very expensive high-end computer hardware that might spend days chewing through data sets. The biggest data set I recall the guys doing back then was 11,000 layers, and it took almost a week. The problem was the human factor, all of us, the analysts. You had to have a live analyst to ensure that the results were something that someone could act on. More often than not, it required repeatedly tweaking a model to get the results into something that a SEAL team could actually act upon. It was extremely powerful, but it was also very slow, outrageously expensive, and singularly dependent on the quality of the analysts who were working the problem. What was state-of-the-art 15 years ago is now available at a local community college anywhere in the country. Cloud storage makes even huge data warehouses dirt cheap, and the new algorithmic alchemy that's available now makes what we did pale by comparison. TikTok has taken these slow, expensive, manual operations and automated them to make them fast and cheap. So let me put this into a context That's a little more valuable for some of the folks in this room, for the people this conference is really set for. In his book, The Accidental Guerrilla, Lieutenant Colonel David Kilcullen outlined the problem of wresting control of a population away from its own government. Conventional military campaigns pressure adversaries by defeating their armed forces through decisive military engagements, crushing their ability to make war. The population is intentionally detached from this fight, isolated within the territory as much as possible. Action is directed only at distinct military targets, command and control centers, fixed weapons platforms, and key decision-making points of the government that are key to combat decision-making. The population is the prize in this sort of conflict. Now contrast this with the unstructured application of irregular warfare. Here the desire to influence or control is the same, but rather than targeting the military apparatus, it is instead marginalized, kept out of the fight completely, if at all possible. Gaining or dismantling support for the government is still the focus and the primary goal, but adversarial military services are sidelined. This is the application of non-lethal instruments of war, which, when properly applied, can be effective in halting or even preventing an armed conflict from taking place at all. So what if, just for the sake of argument, we focus this sort of approach on a population rather than a location? Suppose the goal is not territory, but is instead the hearts and minds of everyone in the territory. In other words, what if the population was the battle space? Where does the population get its information? I once read there are three sources: observation, authority, and belief. By letting go of a baseball, I observe that gravity yanks it to the floor. If I don't have a baseball, but an expert tells me that's what is going to happen, then I have gained knowledge through their authority. If my religious leader tells me it is God's will that the ball is going to hit the floor, I will believe them in the context of my belief system. Kilcullen's model explains what the Taliban did in Afghanistan, manipulating observation and belief to marginalize government authority. When tribal leaders are executed or simply disappear, that's going to be a pretty strong observation point. If religious clerics are compromised into preaching fundamentalist rhetoric, followers have few competing voices to listen to. This was an all too frequent event a few years ago, so it was relatively easy for the Taliban to take over the nation. It demonstrated that manipulating and influencing a population can be done relatively easily if you can control the information they see and hear. This is what alarms American and European authorities about TikTok. Where is the U.S. population getting its information these days? It's certainly not U.S. religion. For the first time in the nation's history, less than 50% of people in the U.S. identify as being part of an organized religious group. It's not from the major news sources that I know I grew up with. CBS, NBC, ABC, they reach less than 40% of the population. I think that number is actually being very kind. I think that's including the local news, not simply the national. And it's not from trust in government. It's always been less than 20%, I think it's around 18 now, that truly trust whatever the government tells them. I would suggest the news sources are disproportionately provided through social media sites. Colonel Robert Killebrew is now a senior fellow for the Center for New American Security, and he once wrote something I thought was very intuitive. He said, "The story you're trying to tell in future conflicts is the strategy by which it will be fought." So if that's true, what is the story with TikTok? TikTok's value comes from its proprietary artificial intelligence algorithm. While most social media applications use metadata in their analysis of users, TikTok has three unique differentiators, each of which is a force multiplier on the others. Walk through that a little quicker. First off is computer. The app analyzes not simply the faces within a video, it also recognizes objects, locations, and actions, crafting additional metadata that was not provided by the film's creator. While facial recognition has been around for years, TikTok assigns emotional qualifiers to the faces it's reading. Are you sad? Are you happy? Are you angry? What's going on? And layers that information in as additional data, again, not provided by the original content creator. You've got linguistic processing. All of the speech and text within the video is captured and analyzed. It's not simply the hashtags that somebody creates when they load the video up. It's all of the language being spoken in the video. It's every sign, it's every caption that's included on the screen, and analyzing that context analyzing that content in the context of what's going on the screen itself. And finally, behavioral measures. While YouTube and Facebook require you to type inputs into their analytic engines, TikTok does this automatically. It evaluates the user's behavior. You don't need to like a video. It's watching what you do while you're watching the video. You stop it before it's finished, you go off to the next one, or do you repeat it and play it again? All of that gets factored into its recommendation algorithm. These three features automate what was a manual activity requiring multiple rounds of data collection from the user and focused analysis by the app on other social media platforms. The result is that within an hour or two, TikTok creates a comprehensive psychological profile on the user that discerns their interests, hobbies, relationship status, political views, and more. A video created by the Wall Street Journal visualizes how TikTok analyzes several automated bots that they created to mimic human behavior. It shows how, starting from a very generalized point, users are quickly ushered into specific areas of content like dance videos. Others may be enticed by cooking videos. Arms radiating out from the center represent niche areas of content. Starting with general videos about cute animals, the users then get curated down to something specific about videos like French bulldogs. The Wall Street Journal's programmed identities are batted around on the platform, the mainstream part of the platform, as the AI algorithm continues to tease out whatever it is the bots have been programmed to be interested in. Now, this graphic is based exclusively on the public hashtags that were included with the video clip. It reflects a mere fraction of what TikTok actually has as far as content. Now, this is something, an ability that Facebook has been pursuing for years. Recently, Facebook anonymously entered their new Cicero AI algorithm into the online negotiation and strategy game Diplomacy. I think a number of folks who have been at the base for some time are probably familiar with that game. The analog was very popular with both JFK and Henry Kissinger back in the day. It's been around a while. Cicero successfully passed itself off as a human player and analyzed the other player's goals, beliefs, and intentions and beat them all handily. According to Stanford Business School professor Dr. Michael Kaczynski, these automated AI-generated profiles are more accurate than the ones that have been created by professional psychologists. I suspect that's because the underlying data is probably more complete, it's unfiltered, it's nuanced, as opposed to simply filling out surveys and answering a bunch of questions. TikTok refines their model in real time using traditional A/B testing, the way marketing research folks would do, through additional video content that it's offering up, and with the results immediately incorporated into the next selection. Now, because this function is automated, it works extremely fast. The app will make calculated determinations of a user's most likely interests and then queue up options for them. If you remember the standardized testing we all took in high school, they ask you the same question a couple of different ways and at a couple of different times. It's the exact same process. Learning your real interests and mitigating any chance of you gaming the system. The psychographic model is extremely accurate and able to measure the user's extroversion, likableness, neuroses, and agreeableness. Now, these are normally qualified by professional evaluation tools such as the FIRO-B, the DISC assessment, or the Minnesota Multiphasic Personality Inventory. But from this, TikTok knows a person's behavioral tics, their emotional state, and how they will respond to specific stimuli. The algorithm could potentially calculate the best type of information to influence a user's behavior before specific events occur. And this is a good bit of the basis for all the uproar. Users don't have to give it explicit permission to do anything. It is automatically mapping out their psyche to provide the best user experience possible. But the flip side of that is the app could also manipulate the user into doing and justifying a range of disturbing actions, including suicide. Some of the loudest opposition from consumers have been families reacting to suicide and eating disorders that have been queued up on TikTok to vulnerable users. The TikTok's artificial intelligence tool can read news from 5,000 different sources and provide a custom-written 400-word assessment on those in 2 seconds. A partner at the venture capital firm, Andreessen Horowitz, described TikTok as, quote, the first mainstream consumer app where artificial intelligence is the product. And I think she's dead on. While Facebook and Twitter and YouTube require the users to actively participate, TikTok makes its decisions passively in the background when your guard is down. Last year, the Pew Research Center published a study revealing 80% of Americans get their news from digital devices. 86% of adults said they get their information from a smartphone, computer, or a tablet, either often or sometimes. When asked what platform they prefer to get news from, just over half of all Americans, 52%, said they prefer a digital platform, news website, podcast, search engine, or social media. Pew's research also showed an overall decline among all social media platforms as news sources, with the exception of TikTok, the only social media platform to see its use as a news source actually rise. If belief is based primarily upon what we read online, then Kilcullen's model is actually alarmingly persuasive and supports the concern that an app with the predictive capability and the power of TikTok is a threat to U.S. national security. Pick your favorite conspiracy. The Earth is flat. We're hiding aliens at Area 51. The chemtrails coming off of planes are controlling our minds. The possibilities for manipulation on nonsense like that are pretty endless. TikTok's misdirection potential became very clear to a lot of people during the search for the killer of 4 college students at the University of Idaho a couple of months back. While police and the FBI immediately honed in on a 28-year-old suspect based on DNA evidence found at the scene, TikTok was awash in false accusations against the roommates, a food truck driver that you've seen on the video, and even a local professor. Idaho later joined Alabama, Georgia, and Texas in banning TikTok from the state schools' devices and Wi-Fi. A few years ago, the Trump administration moved to block TikTok unless the company divested its U.S. operations into a separate entity. I believe one of the panels talked about this briefly yesterday. ByteDance's reaction was very, very fast. Though it balked at revealing how the algorithm worked, it did take efforts to improve its public relations. In June of 2020, it hired a Disney executive named Kevin Mayer as its new American CEO. And 90 days later, with the Trump administration still pushing for a sale, Kevin Mayer quit and left. TikTok's US operations were valued at around $30 billion at that time. So Microsoft and Walmart teamed up to make a purchase. But at that point, the Biden administration was inbound, and ByteDance was under very little real pressure to sell anything. The only material change since then has been the move to put US citizens' data on Oracle servers in the state of Texas, though TikTok will still retain data backups in China. Now, some people are going to look at me and say, this is dumb, this is ridiculous. It's simply a database. What's the big deal? Let me see if a side-by-side comparison will give you an idea of how the threat is a little bit different than what many people think. Most of us are familiar with the Internet Movie Database, the IMDb. That's a website that allows you to look up information about TVs and movies. Who makes them, who stars in them, who the production team was, things of that nature. It is a classic relational database in that it relates one item of information to another. For instance, Kit Harington here is an actor, and in the IMDb, you can see he plays a character named Jon Snow in the HBO hit TV series, Game of Thrones. This is what a relational database shows, is relationships between data points like actors and their characters in the show. Now, contrast this with the contextual analysis artificial intelligence can do with the content of a video. So with Game of Thrones, AI could analyze all 8 seasons. 73 total episodes, processing every image, every word spoken, every action taken, and layering in all of the emotion that is conveyed. Now, here's the rub. It could then craft an ending that's personalized, customized for every single person watching it. Now, the actual Game of Thrones finale was universally panned.
Please don't go.
See a couple of people nodding, so you saw it obviously as well. It was pretty bad. So imagine a conclusion that was individualized for your likes and dislikes, that incorporates your favorite character or your most hated antagonist, reflecting your most intimate hopes or your deepest desires, and potentially delivered right to your device. That is what AI will be able to do. Can it create the background, the scenes, and recreate the characters right now? No, but that day is coming, and we can measure that time in months, not years. We are that close to that. A relational database like the IMDb is a transaction. You look for information, you go in, you get it, and you leave. TikTok is an immersion. It's a platform where you will disappear down any number of rabbit holes, and you're on the app for hours. We were actually talking about that on Sideline earlier this afternoon. This is a significant benefit for TikTok. The business model is very simple. From the early days of television to the radio you're listening to in your car to how Netflix streaming services work, there is a reason why social media platforms operate the way they do. The entertainment business model reflects that sponsors deliver a program to audiences. The program delivers audiences to sponsors. It's that simple. If the sponsors misread the audience, which does happen from time to time, the audience gets ads for products they're not interested in, and the programs don't generally last very long. The same is true for HBO, Hulu, YouTube, Twitch, all the rest of them. Keeping the audience engaged, that is, keeping eyes locked on the screen, is key. If viewers break off, there is less opportunity for sponsors, which translates into less revenue coming to that platform. Moving from sponsors to subscribers does not change the model at all. Keeping eyes on the screen is paramount. TikTok's advantage is that, like a favorite bartender, it knows what you like and how you like it. And so it doesn't wait for you to order anything. It's ready the moment you belly up to the bar. Ayman al-Zawahiri told his followers the majority of this war will be fought on the information terrain. I think we're seeing that play out on a completely different battlefield. So what does all this mean? 10 years ago, Target Corporation, famously or infamously, depending on how you feel about it, sent coupons for diapers and baby formula to a 17-year-old high school girl in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Her father was very angry, as you might imagine, and he contacted the local store to lodge a complaint. What he didn't know is that Target's market intelligence team had analyzed her credit card purchases against other similar young women of her age with similar buying patterns. A few days later, he called again and apologized, to his great credit. His daughter admitted she was in her second trimester. Target knew she was pregnant before her own father did. Now, while this so-called surveillance capitalism got a lot of headlines back then, as a nation, we have fallen way behind in artificial intelligence research. Yes, it is a concern for a corporation to predict something as personal as a pregnancy in a 17-year-old girl, but it's another thing entirely for a hostile foreign power to hold sway on 100 million Americans. An investor noted at a recent conference, if data is the new oil, China is the new Saudi Arabia. Some interesting insight. One national commentator shared the text of TikTok's privacy policy on his broadcast one night, noting it accesses information such as a user's mobile apps, file names, and even keystroke patterns. Those keystrokes include your passwords as well as your user ID. So it could potentially pull data from Facebook, from Twitter, from Outlook, and anything else that's on that mobile device. This explains why Amazon did not want their employees accessing the company email from the same device that has Twitter on it. It is capturing user IDs and passwords on everything it can, including remote hard drives or networks. It also captures face and voice prints. Again, it's all there in the terms of service if you take a look at it. An associate of mine who used to be at MacDill, is now with US Space Command, told me of a cybersecurity professional who downloaded TikTok to his phone. Cybersecurity guy, he had some skills, as you can imagine. He was able to track multiple gigabytes of his data being exported, pictures, contact information, location information, despite the fact that he had never actually opened TikTok at all. So he never gave it permission to do anything. That level of additional data and insight opens up supplementary profiling and influence opportunities, including where to best place persuasive stories on other platforms. I can manipulate anyone if I know where they get their information, with whom they share it, rightly or wrongly, and how they adjust their opinions. This lack of transparency in the algorithm is one of the more troubling aspects of the controversy. While U.S. uncertainty over TikTok's American future plods along, other nations are already taking action. In 2021, India banned TikTok from devices within the country because, along with 58 other China-based apps, for unacceptable data security and personal privacy practices. At the time of the ban, over 200 million Indian citizens were using the app. You've probably heard of companies producing ads with deep fake videos, images of Tom Cruise or Elon Musk or Leonardo DiCaprio without their permission, right? Is that illegal? Obviously, yes. But it's also very effective because when they file a court action against whoever has done it, it draws more attention to the ad. And as I showed with the model earlier, that's the whole purpose of the thing to begin with. ByteDance and TikTok have created their own deepfake company. The new feature is called Face Swap, and it allows users to insert their face on videos created by others. And with the increasing outcry over superimposing women's faces onto pornography videos, this feature has invited even more scrutiny on TikTok when they least needed it. Over the past few months, there's been a number of revelations about the company's data handling. Leaked audio from an internal TikTok meeting suggested engineers in China were accessing US user data. TikTok has admitted their staff can access European users' information. TikTok also had confirmed that employees in China can access Australian users' data. And Forbes recently showed just last year, ByteDance was planning to surveil 2 American reporters using data they had taken from TikTok. So there's no longer any question or uncertainty about whether or not China can access Western citizens' data. The question becomes, what are they planning on doing with it? Artificial intelligence-based video platforms like TikTok have the potential to not only radicalize, they can also educate and train. Not just basic stuff like bomb making, but also specialized tradecraft such as intelligence gathering and counter-surveillance. In 2008, a group took over the Taj Mahal and other luxury hotels in Mumbai, India, killing hostages and setting the buildings ablaze. 169 people died, including 6 Americans. Lashkar-e-Taiba initially recruited 24 operatives and culled them down to 10 through a mix of psychological profiling, basic combat techniques, and specialized training by former Pakistani military personnel. It required a lot of time and money to conduct that training, much of which can now be provided by video over an app, especially when you're going to be employing suicide bombers as they did in that incident. Artificial intelligence could identify potential operatives already in a country, even down to a specific neighborhood. No need to sneak anyone across borders, as they did with this incident, if you can radicalize neighbors right down the street from your intended target. Shorter timelines, lower costs, and reduced risk of discovery would make them far more difficult to stop ahead of time. Now, some people are going to look at this and say, I'm just fear-mongering, that this is all just theoretical on my part. But if anything, I'm downplaying risks a bit because I'm only using open sources here. Americans are already being recruited on TikTok to pick up migrants coming across the border and smuggle them into the interior of the country. Why are they using TikTok to do that? Because the same model has already worked in a sales push, smuggling Albanians across the English Channel. If you saw any of the news earlier in this week, British Parliament decided they had to do something about this now because this has continued to get bigger and bigger and bigger. So let me be clear, I am not an AI hater here, far from it. I think artificial intelligence is doing incredible things. It's providing a new approach for low-cost, high-performance battery materials and increasing battery making efficiencies for electric vehicles. Last summer, Google's DeepMind technologies predicted the structure of nearly all known proteins, which is going to radically improve the speed on new drug discoveries. And right here at USF, 2 doctoral candidates are using artificial intelligence with a new startup to aid in the diagnosis and early detection of Alzheimer's disease. The threat does not come from computers or even from algorithms. It comes from people. And like any threat, the question is one of intent. TikTok is the world's most valuable startup because their technology is just that damn good. But the Chinese Communist Party is our most critical global adversary, and Chinese law mandates they share data with the government upon request. Since he came to power, Xi Jinping has accelerated his authoritarian rule, detaining 1 million Uyghur Muslims and employing torture in Xinjiang, purging any government officials whose loyalty was not absolutely assured. We actually saw some of that earlier this week as well, Tuesday and Wednesday, when a few of his subordinates were just overnight replaced. During this same period over the past few years, though, the CCP has led some of the largest cyber attacks in American history, including the Office of Personnel Management, Marriott Corporation, Anthem Insurance, American Airlines, United Airlines, and the Department of the Navy. Beijing has also clamped down on their domestic Chinese companies, particularly those in the technology arena. In the US, we sometimes see what they're called activist investors take a position. They buy 1 or 2% of the stock in a company so that they can gain a board seat and exert control over it. Beijing has now copied this technique. Through so-called golden shares, state-controlled funds are taking similar control positions in ostensibly public companies in China. In 2021, Beijing pursued Full Truck Alliance Corporation and DiDi Global, their answer to Uber in China, to gain access to user data, no other reason. ByteDance created Beijing Douyin Information Service in May of last year to run the Chinese version of TikTok, and officials confirmed the state owns a piece of that company. In early 2023, Newsweek reported that Chinese government was taking golden shares position in Tencent and in Alibaba. These are not investments for financial gain. It is a means of enforcing control, pure and simple. Beijing's paranoid, freedom-fearing leadership demands their private sector, quote, surrender with absolute loyalty. Questioning the state's monopoly on power is not permitted, a rule that apparently extends overseas as well. In January of this year, the FBI raided a suspected Chinese police station here in the US, in New York City. They've got a little over 100 such police stations around the world. Beijing claimed the office was not doing police work, but news outlets in China were reporting that it was collecting intelligence and working on extraterritorial cases. Last year, Forbes reported over 300 ByteDance employees used to work for the Chinese government, and many of them still do. ByteDance has an internal Chinese Communist Party committee where employees discuss Xi Jinping thought and party doctrine. Can anybody imagine a company in Silicon Valley doing that here? According to leaked company documents, TikTok censors mentions of Tibet, Tiananmen Square, and the Falun Gong religious minority. Current and former ByteDance and TikTok employees recently told Western media that the company can manipulate content delivery outside of the algorithm on request through a process they called heating, as in heating up certain areas of content, confirming the worst of US and European officials' fears on influence and coercion possibilities. In an article about video games about 5 years ago, The Guardian cited an important difference between drug and digital dependencies. It said, quote, substance addictions are nakedly destructive, while many behavioral addictions are quietly destructive, wrapped in cloaks of creation. I think that's a hell of a way to describe TikTok. Now, some people are going to take me to task because I'm comparing Chinese Communist Party with the recent wars in the Middle East. Believe me, I would love to take credit for that. I wish it was my idea, but it wasn't. I'm simply acknowledging what the Chinese themselves have been doing to change their strategy in recent years. In 1999, after Gulf War I, the People's Liberation Army published a book by 2 Chinese colonels. They posited that the whole concept of warfare, everything we understood about it, had changed because of the US's technological advantage over Iraq in Gulf War I. They foresaw the future as being one based on what they characterized as unrestricted warfare. It's a fascinating book that I highly recommend, but one thing in particular I thought I would quote quote, technological progress has given us the means to strike at the enemy's nerve center directly without harming other things, giving us numerous new options for achieving victory, and that makes us believe the best way to achieve victory is to control, not to kill. If the CCP came to that conclusion after Gulf War I, imagine how that strategy has evolved since 9/11, since Iraq II, since the Afghan withdrawal, since the 2016 election debacle, and our continued political rancor. Quite frankly, I think we're making it easy for them to steal us blind. For the past 10 years, it's been our industrial technology. Now it's our individual privacy. What's going to be next? Our national identity? Could be. On average, TikTok users spend over an hour and a half a day on the app, more than any other social media platform. Last year, TikTok's website had more hits on it than Google's. Get your mind around that for a second. More hits than Google. It has turbocharged the successful Tetris and Candy Crush models in an alarming new way that we are morally, politically, and economically unprepared to counter. And that was originally going to be the end of my prepared remarks when I first started talking to GNSI about this back in December. But over the past 90 days, so much has happened that I've had to add to it a little bit. So to wrap up my session today, and we'll open this up to some questions, let me just touch on some of the stuff that's happened since then. I realize not everyone looks at this situation the same way I do, and that's fine. Back in January, 2 Georgia Tech professors published a paper saying TikTok was not a national security threat, but I am forced to respectfully disagree with them. 3 years ago, FBI was looking into foreign spies targeting Georgia Tech, including from China. Now, these 2 professors, from all I can see, are good, well-meaning people. I'm sure they're both stand-up guys that are just trying to enjoy the whole academic freedom of speech thing. But when I look at their backgrounds, I see no national security experience of any sort. Nothing with a 3-letter agency, nothing with the Department of Defense, nothing in the executive branch. They've interviewed people in those areas, but they've no professional experience themselves. It does also not appear that they've ever had a security clearance that would give them access to classified information where they could more effectively make such an assessment. And unfortunately for them, some of the points they make in this paper have now been refuted either by TikTok itself or by other media sources with TikTok sources that they're quoting. That's January. In February, TikTok opened the first of their transparency centers in Los Angeles. They are planning additional centers in Washington, D.C., Dublin, Ireland, where their European data center is supposed to be located, and in Singapore. Though it was called a transparency center, TikTok's PR department made everyone agree to not quote directly or indirectly any comments made by any employees during their tour. Chief Operating Officer Vanessa Pappas and the company's other leaders never actually uttered the word China during any of their on-the-record remarks. I mentioned earlier President Trump wanted to divest TikTok from ByteDance during his administration or risk a national ban. Interesting, when he did that, the Chinese government amended its tech export rules. And theirs are very similar to ours. It restricts what can be exported from the country, and most of that's pretty obvious. Certain types of encryption, advanced laser technologies, things of that nature. But they also added artificial intelligence know-how to their export list because of that. So as a result, text analysis, content recommendation engines, speech modeling, and voice recognition can no longer be exported. Any technologies on that list cannot be exported without a license from the government, according to the executives of ByteDance itself. So much for transparency. Finally, here in March, 2 weeks from today, March 23rd, TikTok's CEO, Xiaozi Chu, will testify before the House Energy and Commerce Committee. This guy's career history is fascinating. If you look at his LinkedIn page, it oddly does not include being CFO at ByteDance, but his Crunchbase profile does. Maybe just an oversight. Now, Chu's supporters like to point out that he is a citizen of Singapore. He is not a Chinese national. I'm not sure why that's relevant. Kevin Mayer from Disney wasn't a Chinese national either, and that didn't really help him with the controversy. He now did it. After college, Chu spent a couple years at Goldman Sachs and then went to get his MBA from Harvard Business School. And in the summer of those 2 years, he went and interned at a little startup called Facebook. After he finished his MBA, he went to join DST Global, which was founded by the Russian investor Yuri Milner, where he was described as their point man for China. Some of the folks who have worked the Russian desks for a few years no doubt know Milner's name. He was also an early and large investor in Facebook. Chu led DST's investment in ByteDance and also clinched some of the most lucrative deals in Chinese internet history. JD.com, Alibaba, even Didi, the ride-hailing company. I wonder how he did that, being a Singapore citizen, not a citizen of China. From there, he became CFO of Xiaomi, which is a very big smartphone maker in China, very successful. He led their 2018 initial public offering and was promoted to president of their international business the following year. In 2020, though, they had a little problem. Cybersecurity professionals here and in Europe found that Xiaomi phones were sending extraordinary amounts of data to remote servers in Russia and Singapore, even though their domain names were registered in China. The software had recorded all of the websites visited, including searches via Google or DuckDuckGo, everything viewed on the newsfeed feature, even when the phone was set to private mode. It recorded what folders were opened, which screens were swiped, including the status bar and the settings page. So what you have here is a CEO with a lot of experience capturing smartphone data and directing it through servers in third-party countries before sending it to China. I would argue Shou Chu was named CEO because his Xiaomi experience demonstrated a mental toughness that Beijing liked. They consider him one of them, part of the whole CCP club. Look at the turnover in the other big Chinese technology companies. And one of the folks on the panel yesterday mentioned this in passing. Jack Ma at Alibaba, Colin Huang Zheng at PDD, and even ByteDance's original CEO and co-founder, Zhang Yiming. Beijing cracked down on all the big Chinese tech companies in November 2021, a move that appears to have been sparked by Jack Ma's controversial speech attacking China's financial regulators. CNN suggested it wasn't about, quote, killing the private sector as much as it was taming the excesses of capitalism and embracing the country's history of socialism. Beijing wants a strong international voice for these tech firms, but only when it is completely committed to their policies. Forbes noted a couple of years back that Singapore straddles the divide between East and West. I think Shou Chu has leveraged that. If he is at a disadvantage in not being a Chinese national, I think he's taking advantage of that disadvantage. In my opinion, Singapore is for this Cold War what Berlin was for the last one. Or to put it less diplomatically, it is simply a waypoint for data going to Beijing. My unsolicited advice is to delete TikTok from your phones and change every password that device has ever contained. And on that rather menacing note, I'll again thank General McKenzie and everybody at the GNSI for the kind invitation to speak today, and I'm happy to answer a few questions. I do have a couple of backup slides depending on what the mood of the room is. Now, we have microphones, yes? Anyone?
In deleting that app, have you seen any stay-behind malware that would continue to transmit any of that data that it's mining when the app is actually on the phone?
I have not, but that is a question I know cybersecurity people are looking at because that has come up with other applications. But that is a good question. It's interesting, I was talking to some of the guys on the production team beforehand. There's been so much churn on this just in 24 hours. Yesterday, Marco Rubio and FBI Director Christopher Wray were actually nice to each other in testimony on Capitol Hill. That doesn't happen very often. And they were agreeing that the ban on TikTok for federal phones is going to continue to move forward. Director Ray said, it's never been allowed on FBI devices and never will as long as I'm director. So it was interesting to see the two of them actually getting along and being courteous to each other. And then this morning, there is a report out that a whistleblower from TikTok or ByteDance has come forward to one of the members of Congress that's on the committee reviewing the issue with TikTok and has offered evidence showing that some of the Chinese nationals are going through user data on American citizens and Europeans. I've not been able to see what that actual reporting looks like yet, but apparently the congressperson specifically had to reach out to Janet Yellen, who is as the Treasury Director, is in charge of the Committee on Foreign Investment in the U.S. that's really taking point on the whole TikTok question. And that's just been in the past 24 hours. Anybody else? Yes, ma'am.
All right, feeding off the remarks that you brought up with Director Ray, we've seen new legislation proposed recently in order to deal with TikTok and other Chinese apps. In your opinion, is these steps something that is going to be able to counter Chinese information ops, as we were discussing earlier in the day? And in addition to that, if we are able to degrade their operability in the US domestic sphere, is there any degree that we need to be concerned about in partnerships that we would still have access through Chinese information?
Is that going to do it all by itself? No, it's going to be one brick in the wall. It's going to have to be part of a much, much larger strategy. I did see Congress has now created a completely separate committee that just kicked off in the past week on addressing the China issue as far as strategy going forward. We've never done something like that before, so I'm hoping and I believe Kathy Castor, who was part of the conference yesterday, is part of that committee. So I'll be curious to see what happens with that. I was talking to a couple of people on the House Select Committee on Intelligence earlier in the week that I've known for years and we've just been friends with, asking how much are they involved in that new committee's activity. And he said very heavily that there's been a lot of classified discussions going on. They've been asking for evidence that they can see behind closed doors to try and get their arms around that very question. Will that be enough going forward? Probably not. It's going to take additional efforts. I have not had a chance this week to look at this whole crane issue as far as the ports and the Chinese cranes. Could they be capturing data? If they're fully automated the way that the very small article that I saw was describing them, could they be capturing data? Yes. Would that be enough to stop military activities if military equipment was going through some of those ports? Potentially. That's stuff we have gamed out before. Have we gamed it out specifically thinking about China versus somebody else? I'm sure somebody in the audience probably knows that better than I do. I've not seen that, but I am sure that sort of question has come up a couple of times now, especially with some of the difficulties we've had in getting stuff shipped from point A to point B.
If someone has never downloaded TikTok to their cell phone as an app, but they see a video, do an internet search and it's a TikTok video, does TikTok then have access to that phone, or do you have to have the app to get the access?
It's interesting. I asked the same question and I got two very different answers from people who do this for a living up in the DC area. So I think some of them do shuttle information back to TikTok depending on how the connection is done. Whether you're looking at it through Facebook or Twitter apparently makes a difference. If you're looking at it on a PC versus a mobile device also makes a difference. So I think when I asked the question, I didn't ask the right one, so that's on me. But then I sat down and started thinking, okay, well, what else am I not asking? What other data devices could they be going through? And there's been reporting on the Amazon Ring doorbell. Can anybody see people through that? Have people had problems with their baby monitors? Absolutely. Can you start to collect information through those? Yes, absolutely. But is it a comprehensive program the way we're seeing at TikTok? Probably not. But as we get more and more connected devices in our lives, now including with electric vehicles, which are going to be twice as connected as gas-powered vehicles have been, what sort of security protocols are going into that? I was talking with somebody earlier about medical devices. There's been a real push now on medical device security because mostly they don't have any security on them at all. Same thing with 3D printers. So you really got to start thinking what's going to be the data privacy issue on this new whiz-bang toy that we're making before we put the design to the final committee that's going to check off on it. data privacy and the data analytics is going to have to be part of that discussion, which we've never done before.
Question, so the algorithm that's used to cater content to consumers, have we seen it used outside of catering videos of dogs and being used by China to push a specific narrative or used in like information operations against either domestic populace or internationally?
I have not seen that. I did see somebody publish the basic piece of the algorithm. It apparently was in an early TikTok employee manual that somebody put online. But it even says there, this is just the basic mathematics. It does not include all the subtle nuances that can be integrated in. Again, part of that A/B testing I mentioned. Could you use that for an information operation? Absolutely. Much earlier in my career, when I was much younger, I used to teach social engineering techniques. And I would teach them to military intelligence officers, to attorneys, things of that nature. It's much easier than you might think. So we would bring people together. We do an 8-hour class over the course of the day. And then I would bring them to a college campus, to a shopping center, to a convention center. And I would point somebody out and say, see the guy in the black jacket? I want his mother's maiden name. I want the PIN number off of his Visa card. Has he ever cheated on his wife? Any illegitimate children? DUI arrest? 10 things he is never going to tell a complete stranger. And they'll come back the next morning with 8 out of the 10 things. He will never remember the conversation took place. The first time something like that was done to me, I didn't believe it. And that's what got me working into psychological operations, particularly I was doing it on the private sector side. So we were working mergers and acquisitions. If you wanted to buy somebody's company, you could hire us, or your law firm would hire us, and we would psych profile the negotiating team you'd be sitting across the table from. So this is the guy making the decision. You want to whisper in his ear, but you want to go through her voice, and we'll show you, and we'll map the whole thing out for you. I thought that was absolute BS and made fun of it. And the woman who is the forensic psychologist we were using decided to do me. That's a humbling experience. She never spoke directly to me. She talked to my friends, my family, my neighbors, my coworkers, and completed a comprehensive psychological profile on me without my knowledge and just dropped it on the desk one day. And because I worked where I worked, I'd had a full-on psychological profile done, so I knew what was in it to a certain degree. They show you some, not all. And I'm sitting there looking at this thinking, that took 3 days, full days at the agency to do this profile. She did the whole thing over a few weeks and never spoke to me directly. Holy crap. So she made a believer out of me, and we would go and talk to some of the local law firms here in the area and say, we'll offer this up for free. If we don't shave a few $1 million off the price tag, cost is on us. We never gave one away. And again, my point earlier, TikTok has really automated a lot of that stuff because everything you're doing in your life is going to be on that phone. I was surprised at just how easy it is to do now because I hate carrying my cell phone with me, but like everybody else, people want to be able to reach you. You want to be able to exchange business cards, exchange information. You want your calendar. It's all right there. The problem is, it's all right there. That's a great question. I've got a couple of others if people just want to see what else I created for backups, just out of curiosity. Forgot to include that. So what do all these social media and streaming platforms have in common? People ask me this all the time. They all have significant Chinese ownership or partnership. Have for years. Has not been a problem. Not a problem now that I'm aware of. Wanda's all right, maybe the AMC investment's not been so great since the pandemic because nobody was going to theaters for a while, but prior to that, I think they were perfectly happy with their investment in AMC theaters. Tencent has owned a good piece of Spotify and Snapchat for several years. GM's partnership with SAIC is really on technology development. It's not an exchange of financial dollars in any real sense, but that's gone on for a couple of years. H&A and Hilton. Haier has owned GE Appliances outright since 2015, 2016. And that's been great. I mean, they've kept an American brand alive when otherwise it was going to go wayside. The designs are largely done in China, but the production is done both in the US, in Latin America, and a couple of places still in Europe. And that's gone very, very well. Somebody's also pitched to me on maybe the American social media apps were forcing the US government to help them compete against ByteDance. Again, when I put pencil to paper, I don't see that. ByteDance owns, these are the four biggest. They own several other small firms as well. They've been on a real acquisition hunt the past couple of years. We've talked about TikTok with short form video. You've got Snapchat and Instagram, which is now owned by Meta. You've got Twitter that shut down Vine a few years back. Could they bring that back? I don't know why not. Short form video, all the programming still got to be there. You could update it. But that's a couple of well-known brands. Same thing on work collaboration. Faishu, I think, has gotten $100 million in revenue over the past year. It's doing really well. But it's going head-to-head with Slack. Autonomous vehicles, you've got Waymo and Cruise. There's 2 or 3 others as well that have been around for a number of years. Virtual reality, ByteDance just picked up Pico, but it's supposed to be going head-to-head now with Oculus, which is now owned by Facebook as well, and Magic Leap. So, yeah, you're going head-to-head against some of the biggest, most entrenched brands in technology that are out there. I mean, that's a hard nut to crack. Let's assume for a moment that you're going to make that choice. Well, then you're going up against its ownership, which has very, very deep pockets and bench depth that would rival the New York Yankees. You're picking a hell of a fight there. So do we really think any of these Silicon Valley companies are going to race over to Congress and beg for help? They don't want to be in Washington, D.C. any more than the ByteDance people do. They don't want to work with them. But let's assume, under the most extraordinary of circumstances, they did. They went and said, Congress, we've got to have help. TikTok and ByteDance are kicking our butts. We've got to do something. What congresswoman or man is going to stick their neck out for Facebook or Twitter? None of them. Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, I mean, that's political kryptonite. Nobody's going to stick their neck out for them. That's the trifecta of pain points no member of Congress wants. Are they going to stick their neck out for walk away from the mic, from the Saudi Arabian Sovereign Wealth Fund, which is who now owns Magic Leap? No, that's just not going to happen. That's political suicide any way you look at it. Some people have told me that they really don't care if other people are looking at their data, which I call BS on very quickly. There was an article in the Wall Street Journal about the horror of realizing everybody can see your calendar entries. Calendar entries? Really? That's what you're going to be concerned about if somebody's looking at your phone? And yet we're not concerned that China is restricting the data handling that American companies and European companies can use in China and what they can export? Yet they've banned Facebook for years, Instagram for years, Twitter for years. Nobody's bringing that up for whatever reason. I don't quite understand it. And finally, the other question that people have been asking me about recently is the Berman Amendments. Can you really ban TikTok with the Berman Amendments? So I had to go and look and see what are the Berman Amendments. Howard Berman was a congressman from the 26th district, which covered Los Angeles. And back in 1988, or what college students now call the Dark Ages, he created an exception for the International Emergency Powers Act for what he called information products. We call that intellectual property now, but back then he wanted to make sure we could protect the market access for the people in Los Angeles who do movies and music and books. Copyrighted material that would be available behind the Iron Curtain if US relations with Russia continued to deteriorate as they were doing in the 80s. That's all the Berman Amendments are for. Copyrighted material, not for personal information coming off of somebody's device, their Face ID, their pictures, their emails, things like that, going to a foreign corporation or to a foreign power. What's interesting is Howard Berman retired a couple of years ago, and he's now advising Covington and Burling, which is representing TikTok in its case here in the US. According to the website, he is not currently practicing as an attorney. As I said, he spent 30 years as a congressman, so I think he's just retired. But they put him under contract as an advisor. Well, what does that mean? That means he can't be compelled to testify for the government in this issue. He is now protected under attorney-client privilege simply as an advisor. Because what would he say? I suspect he would tell Capitol Hill, well, this was really designed for copyrighted material, not for personal information. Sorry, but now he can no longer be compelled to do that. So, any other questions? Well, I appreciate, yep, in the back. Well, that's a good question. Do I think they'll end up banning TikTok? Yes, I think they will. It is probably one of the only things that Democrats and Republicans seem to agree on right now. I think there are some people modeling what the exploitation could look like if you were to go after certain types of people. One of the other questions I get is, let's see if it's the next slide. Oops. Why aren't they going after WeChat? I get that question quite a bit, which is probably fair. Why are we singling out TikTok? Well, look at who TikTok is going after. 13, 14, 15-year-old Americans. Most of the people using WeChat have gray hair and look like me, only they're Chinese speaking, either Chinese speaking in the US, either as Americans, nationalized American citizens, or they're Chinese expats living in the US or in Europe. For those who don't know, WeChat is sort of, it's commonly referred to as the everything app, which I think is pretty accurate. It does a lot of good things, a lot of things, and it does them all well. It is a phone call, it is video chats, video games, shopping, everything you see here. And it was very early on as smartphones took off in China a few years ago. So this was the software driving the hardware sales to people who had never had access to any of these sort of services before. So it's been great for them. But the majority of the stuff being done on it is being done in Mandarin. There's some Cantonese, some of the regional dialects as well. And I just don't see the US Congress getting their arms around this because it's not affecting and modeling young people behavior. Teenagers, basically, that are on TikTok, they are not typically on WeChat. Most of the folks on WeChat are in their late 20s, early 30s at the youngest. And they're able to make an intelligent decision about what access they want to provide to the Chinese government, who they know is monitoring everything on WeChat. There is a police station inside WeChat's headquarters in Beijing, just like there is in Alibaba. The people using the app know that, so they are careful with what they put on it. This is not the platform for talking about taking over the country in Beijing. You don't do that here. So you've made an intelligent decision that you're going to allow them access to whatever bills you're paying and the appointments you're setting up, because it does let you keep in touch with family and friends in China, and it does that very well. But it's not modeling and profiling young Americans who simply don't know any better. That, to me, is the real difference. All right, well, thank you all very much for coming. I'll stay around afterwards if anybody has any other questions. I appreciate you stopping in.